States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
And joining me now is Lawrence Wilkerson, professor of government and public policy at William & Mary. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel and former chief of staff to U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell. Thank you so much for being here. Mr. Wilkerson, you were just the person that we wanted to talk to about this, because I don't know if maybe my frame of this is incorrect, but it seems to me that you have a president with no fixed ideology, surrounded by ideologues, who came in with his then National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, immediately out of the box threatening Iran, now seem to be threatening North Korea and sending additional troops to ISIS. Am I wrong to start to see a George W. Bush sort of vibe creeping into the Trump administration?
Joy, I almost want to say I wish it were George W. Bush. This, I think, is far worse. And let me just preface my remarks. I don't often do this, but I've been involved with the Koreas, with China, Japan, and the Koreas for over 40 years. I've been on the peninsula off and on every year virtually. I've participated in the highest level exercises with former ministers of defense in Korea and Bill Perry, for example, former Secretary of Defense in the U.S. I know this region as well as anyone, certainly better than Donald Trump, better even than H.R. McMaster, Jim Mattis, or others in the administration. And I am really concerned about the kind of bellicose language that I hear, particularly in light of the fact we've just lost the leader of the Republic of Korea, South Korea, Park, in basically an impeachment proceeding. And we're looking at a by-election and a new leader in that country, and we're trying to force theater high-altitude air defense down their throat because we're afraid the new president might not accept it. These are dangerous times, but I would submit to you that Rex Tillerson knows a lot about fossil fuel and very little about the Koreas, and Donald Trump even less, and that's very worrisome.
And yet they're using this very bellicose language, and I think your point is well taken, because you have a team that is very inexperienced. At least around George W. Bush, you had people who had lots of governmental experience and even diplomatic experience. This is a team, to your point, where the Secretary of State was an oil man before. You just mentioned terminal high-altitude area defense, what they call THAAD, and this is a ballistic missile defense system that the U.S. recently began constructing in South Korea, intended to protect the South from North Korean aggression. Instead, it's likely the system will just antagonize China, whose cooperation will be necessary to diffuse tensions on the Korean peninsula and provide North Korea, all without providing the South with a reliable defense against attack. And that was from The Hill earlier today. Did the Obama administration attempt to get that in place because they saw the South Korean president, on her way out? And if Donald Trump were to upend it, were to pull it out, were to get rid of THAAD, what would be the implications there?
Well, you just put your finger on at least a tactical part of this situation right now. This is not just about Korea, North or South, or about Japan alone. It's also about China. When Richard Haas and I met with the current foreign minister of China, Wang Yi, and the current ambassadors of the United States from China, Shui Tenkai, in the summer of 2001, China was pretty obviously not for public consumption, but comfortable with the U.S. presence in the region, considering the 7th Fleet and other elements of U.S. power there, including those on the Korean Peninsula. Now they're not. It's a very different situation. China has, in a word, grown up, and its military has grown up, and now China is asserting its sovereignty in all manner of places, most forcefully in the South China Sea. And we're putting our fingers, as we did in Mr. Putin's eyes, with deployment of ballistic missile defense into former NATO and Warsaw Pact country, in Mr. Xi's eyes, because we're doing it, and China sees it being done against them. And I'd be a fool to sit here and tell you that that wasn't part of the reason for the deployment. This is a very disconcerting situation in Northeast Asia, one I haven't seen in a long time. Prime Minister Abe is growing Japan up to be a more normal country because he's very distrustful, I think, of the United States and the security relationship, and even more distrustful because we've got this unpredictable, uncertain, inexperienced man in the White House. If you looked at Angela Merkel's face yesterday, and before that, Theresa May's face, I think you understand the angst our chief allies in the world are going through right now. Who is this man, they're asking themselves, and how could the American people have put this man in the White House?
Yeah, indeed. And I think perhaps some people in this country might be asking the same thing.
I think so.
It's quite unpredictable. Thank you so much, Colonel Wilkerson. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And up next,